He hadn't eaten since morning. The sun pressed down on the tin roof like a hand that would not let go. Grease stained the pads of his fingers, and the palm of his hand smelled of old oil and solder. Ethan Brooks wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist and listened to the neighborhood. A dog barking 2 blocks over, the distant clatter of a bus, the soft rattle of a motorcycle sputtering as it fought for life on the road. Rent was due in 3 days. The last bottle of engine oil sat half full on a shelf, so dented it leaned like a tired man. He tightened a bolt and hoped the radiator would hold until the week turned. Then the bike coughed and died right in front of his shed. She walked up with a helmet under her arm, sunglasses pushed back, the kind of composed fatigue that comes from moving through a world used to people watching. Everyone in town might not know her name, but the moment felt different, like a polished object placed among rusted tools. Ethan's stray dog, an old mutt with one eye, padded forward, tail cautious. Ethan checked the engine without surprise. He'd seen worse. A cracked spark plug, a frayed wire, oil low enough to make any mechanic clench his jaw. He could see the expense written in the parts she needed. Her hand trembled slightly when she removed her gloves. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. Her voice was small in that wide, sunlight-dusted yard. "I don't know mechanics here." Ethan glanced at the teeth of his toolbox, at the worn parts he kept for emergencies. He thought of the rent notice tucked behind a can of bolts. He thought of the boy from down the street who'd been asking him to teach him basics of an engine so he wouldn't grow up thinking a job like this was shameful. He shrugged, the way people do when they choose to carry someone else's burden for a while. "Bring it up here," he said. "I'll take a look." If this kind of story lifts you up, hit subscribe. There are more like this. He worked with the economy of someone used to stretching a single wrench into 3 tasks. He scavenged a spare plug he'd kept because it was the only one that fit older models, siphoned a little oil from a reserve meant for emergencies, threaded a new wire with hands that had made small miracles out of broken things before. Heat blurred the edges of the day. The dog settled against his ankles. 2 hours felt like 2 minutes, and also like a lifetime. When the engine finally caught and the motorcycle purred, it sounded to Ethan like a small victory bell. She offered him money, folding a card between her fingers like a small apology. He waved it away, the motion swift and reflexive. "It's all right," he said. "Just promise me you'll ride careful." She laughed then, a soft, honest sound that didn't belong to any headline. "I will," she said. "Thank you. Truly." She rode off, the bike humming a steady song that made the heat seem kinder. Ethan watched until the dust swallowed the taillight. He went back to his workbench, to his half-full oil and his rent notice, thinking the world would be the same tomorrow. Small kindness, small calculations. The day closed. Morning came with a sound he recognized, a low, careful engine that didn't belong to an ordinary commuter. A black SUV eased into the lot like it had a right to the road. She stepped out again, the same quiet composure, flanked by an assistant and a bodyguard who moved with the careful certainty of someone trained to read threats out of a room. He wore sunglasses, even though the sky was gray with early light. His jaw was a plane of professionalism. He assessed Ethan as though evaluating a risk. Ethan felt suddenly as if he was a specimen in a glass case, exposed but honest. The assistant introduced herself politely. The bodyguard didn't speak unless he had to. His posture was short, closed. His gaze slid from the tools, to the dog, to Ethan's hands. For a moment he made no move to soften. His face was a flat ocean. Then something shifted. She stepped forward and placed an envelope on the bench. It was thicker than an apology. She said simply, "You helped me yesterday. We want to make sure you're okay." The envelope was not a parade. It was practical. There was a check inside and, more quietly, a card with a name and a note. Someone who managed community grants and programs that connected small, honest businesses with seed funding and space. A person who liked to help mechanics who taught kids. The bodyguard's reaction was small and human. His posture loosened. A hand went to his mouth, an almost hidden gesture, like someone who'd swallowed surprise and found it lodged in his throat. For the first time, the hard plane of his face softened. The line around his eyes eased. He studied Ethan not as a problem to be managed, but as a person whose life had been touched and who had touched back in return. There was no applause. There was a silent recognition. Dignity recognized dignity. "That's him?" the bodyguard asked, quieter than before. She nodded. "That's him." He expected something transactional, an exchange of money for a favor. Instead, he watched a small human economy at work. Kindness returned with respect, not spectacle. The envelope would be enough to keep the rent wolf at bay for a while. The contact might open a door that had been stuck for years. The assistant listed a practical next step: someone who could help with permits, a local nonprofit looking to fund workshops, a community event where Ethan could display his work and teach. The offers were real but framed as opportunities, not guarantees. Introductions, referrals, a chance to be seen. Ethan's cheeks burned. He'd been raised not to accept charity that felt like alms. He took the envelope with both hands and looked up at the woman who'd put her trust in him by asking for help in the first place. He looked at the man who had stiffened and then softened, the guard who'd seen everything through the narrow lens of duty and had, in the span of a look, been reminded of why people mattered. "You didn't have to," Ethan said. "You did it because it was right," she answered. "We wanted to do the same." They talked for a few minutes more, about the kinds of repairs he liked, the boy from the street who wanted to learn, the small things that keep a community moving. The bodyguard occasionally nodded, his earlier suspicion replaced by an attentive calm. He held the space around them without shutting the door. That was its own kind of protection. Months later, a new sign hung over the shed. It wasn't flashy, just freshly painted letters and a brighter lamp by the door. The bodyguard had a little bed now. The rent notices came and went, but they were no longer the cliff edge they had been. Ethan ran early morning classes for neighborhood kids.